Adrian Newey was supposed to build Aston Martin's championship car. Instead, the first day of the 2026 season ended with something nobody expected. Fernando Alonso did not run in free practice 1. Lance Stroll completed only 3 laps. And when the team finally managed to keep the car on track in the second session, the AMR26 was more than 5 seconds slower than the fastest car in Melbourne. 5 seconds. In modern Formula 1, that is not just a bad start. That is a crisis. But the lap time is only part of the story. Because inside the Aston Martin garage, Adrian Newey reportedly discovered something far more worrying. The team may already be running out of Honda power unit components. No spare margin. No extra battery packs. And severe engine vibrations that are shaking the entire car. So strong that Fernando Alonso admitted parts of his hands were going numb during runs. Which means Aston Martin is now facing 3 different problems at the same time. A car that is dramatically slow. A power unit under extreme stress. And a shocking shortage of replacement parts during the very first race weekend of the season. And that raises a question that nobody expected to ask in Melbourne. How did a project built with Adrian Newey, Honda, and hundreds of millions in investment, arrive at the first race of the new era already on the edge of a technical crisis? Before we break down exactly what happened during the first day of the Australian Grand Prix, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Because the details coming out of the Aston Martin garage tonight are even more surprising than the lap times. What makes this situation even more surprising is that Aston Martin was never supposed to start the season like this. For the last 2 years, this team has been building one of the most ambitious projects Formula 1 has seen in a very long time. Lawrence Stroll invested hundreds of millions into a completely new headquarters in Silverstone. A new wind tunnel. A new simulator. Entire new engineering departments. The goal was very clear. Transform Aston Martin into a championship team. But the real turning point came when they signed Adrian Newey. Because Newey is not just another engineer. He is the designer behind some of the most dominant cars in the history of Formula 1. Championship machines at Williams. Championship machines at McLaren. And more recently, the cars that dominated the modern era at Red Bull. So when Aston Martin convinced him to join the project, many people inside the paddock believed something historic was about to begin. Because Newey was arriving at exactly the right moment. The 2026 regulation reset. New aerodynamic rules. New power units. New electrical systems. Everything starting from zero. And that is the kind of situation where Newey has always been the most dangerous. Give him a clean sheet of paper. Give him new regulations. And suddenly his cars become incredibly fast. That was the theory behind the AMR26? A car designed completely around the new rules. But there was another key element in this project. Honda. For 2026, Honda returned as the exclusive power unit supplier for Aston Martin. Which meant the car and the engine had to be developed together from the very beginning. In theory, that is the perfect scenario. Engine and chassis designed as one single project. Maximum efficiency. Maximum performance. But there is also a hidden risk when you design a car that way. If one part of the project is not ready, the entire car suffers. And according to several reports coming from inside the paddock, the first warning signs appeared months ago during winter testing. The AMR26 struggled to complete long runs. Engineers repeatedly stopped the car in the garage. Not for small adjustments. For serious inspections. Because something unusual kept appearing in the data. Vibrations. Stronger than expected vibrations coming from the Honda power unit. At first the team believed it could be solved with normal setup adjustments. But the deeper they investigated, the more complex the problem became. Because the vibrations were not only coming from the engine. They were traveling through the entire structure of the car. Through the gearbox. Through the suspension. And eventually reaching the cockpit. Fernando Alonso himself admitted that during longer runs he could feel parts of his hands becoming numb. Which immediately raised concerns inside the team. Because if those vibrations continue during a full race distance, they could even affect the drivers physically. But the biggest technical concern was not the cockpit. It was the battery. Under the 2026 regulations, electrical power is now a massive part of total performance. Cars must recover huge amounts of energy under braking. Store that energy in the battery. And deploy it again through the electric motor during acceleration. Without that system working perfectly, the car loses enormous performance. And according to several reports inside the paddock, the Honda engine may currently be struggling to reach the required levels of energy recovery. Which creates a dangerous chain reaction. Less recovered energy. Less electrical deployment. Less power on the straights. And more pressure on the battery system to compensate. That is when temperatures increase. Mechanical stress increases. and the vibrations become even more damaging. Suddenly the car is not just slower. It becomes fragile. And this is exactly why Aston Martin arrived in Melbourne with so much caution. Because engineers already knew that the AMR26 might be operating within an extremely narrow safety window. Push the car too hard, and something could fail. Protect the hardware too much, and the lap times become painfully slow. So before the cars even rolled onto the track in Australia, Aston Martin already knew this weekend could become very complicated. But what nobody expected was just how quickly the situation would escalate once the first practice session actually began. When free practice 1 finally began in Melbourne, Aston Martin needed one thing more than anything else. Laps. Just laps. Because this car arrived at the Australian Grand Prix with very little mileage from testing. Very little real data. And in Formula 1, the first session of the season is where everything begins to make sense. Drivers learn the track conditions. Engineers analyze temperatures. The team studies energy recovery, tire behavior, aerodynamics. Every lap matters. But for Aston Martin, that plan collapsed almost immediately. Because Fernando Alonso never even left the garage. While the rest of the grid was already circulating around Albert Park, Alonso's car remained stationary inside the pit box. Engineers were studying the power unit data. Mechanics were inspecting the rear of the car. And after a few minutes, the team confirmed the decision. Alonso would not participate in the session. A suspected power unit issue forced Aston Martin to stop the car completely before it even reached the track. For any team, that is a serious loss. But for a car already struggling during testing, it is even worse. Because without those laps, engineers cannot understand the real behavior of the AMR26. They cannot analyze the vibrations. They cannot study the battery temperatures. They cannot evaluate how the Honda power unit performs under race weekend conditions. And while Alonso stayed in the garage, the pressure inside the team started to grow. Then Lance Stroll finally took the car out. At first, everything seemed normal. The car completed its installation lap. No alarms. No smoke. No obvious failure. But only a few laps later, the engineers made another call. Stroll was ordered back to the pits. 3 laps. That was the entire running Aston Martin completed during free practice 1. 3 laps of real track data. For a brand new car. Under brand new regulations. At the first race of the season. Inside the paddock, people immediately understood what that meant. The team was not simply being cautious. They were protecting something. And that something appears to be the battery system. Because according to information revealed during the weekend, Aston Martin only has 2 battery packs available for the entire event. 2. The same 2 installed in the cars of Alonso and Stroll. There are no extra replacements ready to install. Which means if one battery is damaged by vibration or overheating, the team could suddenly find itself unable to continue running. That is an extraordinary situation in modern Formula 1. Especially for a team that invested so heavily in this project. But the real shock of the day came later, during free practice 2. Because this time the cars actually managed to complete the session. Both drivers were able to run longer stints. The batteries survived. No shutdowns. No immediate mechanical failures. From a reliability perspective, that looked like a small victory. But then the timing screens revealed the real problem. Performance. Oscar Piastri set the fastest lap of the session. And Aston Martin were nowhere near that time. Both cars finished roughly 5 seconds slower than the leaders. 5 seconds. That gap is enormous in modern Formula 1. It places the car not just at the back of the grid, but dangerously close to something teams fear during qualifying. The 107% rule. If a car is slower than 107% of the fastest qualifying time, it can technically be excluded from the race. And suddenly that possibility is being discussed inside the paddock. A team that hired Adrian Newey. A team that partnered with Honda. A team that built one of the most expensive facilities in the sport. Now facing the risk of struggling just to qualify. And when Adrian Newey spoke to the media after the session, his comments made the situation even more uncomfortable. Because he admitted that the vibration problem from the Honda power unit is still affecting the car. He admitted that the electrical system is under enormous stress. And most importantly, he admitted that solving this problem will not be quick. It may take months. Which means Aston Martin could spend a large part of the 2026 season trying to stabilize the car before they can even think about performance. For Fernando Alonso, that reality is particularly painful. Because he joined this project believing 2026 would be the moment everything aligned. New regulations. A legendary designer. A factory built for championship ambitions. And yet after the very first day of the season, the team is already fighting something much more basic than lap time: reliability, stability, and simply keeping the car alive on track. Which raises a much bigger question for the rest of this weekend in Melbourne. If the vibrations continue, if the electrical system remains this fragile, and if Aston Martin really has no spare battery units available, then what happens when the AMR26 tries to survive an entire Grand Prix distance?